ladies and gentlemen, my name is Total Biscuit, and welcome to my little after-hour lounge. Today we're gonna kick back in a velvet chair, get a nice glass of Forced Showdown. This is a title by Beta Dwarf. That's really hard to say. You want to try that again? Let's try that again. The first Forced game, was a 4-player co-op top-down twin-stick thingy with some puzzle elements. This is not really that. This is a single-player roguelite twin-stick arena combat game. That's probably the best way to describe it. I don't even know if it's a twin-stick, really. It's probably not the best way to describe it, but it is a game in which you are thrown into an arena, which is part of a fantasy game show. You are expected to make your way through the various short arenas. Every time you do so, you will upgrade your character, and beat a couple of these arenas, you'll get to move on to the next level, and eventually, hopefully, beat the entire game show. This is the first game show, the Crucible. There are 2 more beyond this that you have to unlock, and they take quite a lot of work to do. Now, as usual with After Hour, I play the game for about an hour. I accidentally played it for 2, just sort of in one session, because I was actually rather enjoying myself. And this is a surprise to me, because when I initially tried this game a couple of months ago, it didn't click within sort of the first 10 or so minutes. And I'd sort of put it aside and went on to something else and never really came back to it. But I decided to give it another whack, and I'm kind of glad that I did, because I think I get what it's trying to do now. So we're going to jump right into it and show you exactly how this works. We've got 2 of the 4 characters unlocked here, the Squire of Light and Volko, who's a fellow with a hammer. We also have a couple of companions available. We're going to go with Brutus here, I think. He's a sort of dinosaur thingy. He'll come and help you out. And I also get to choose a deck. Now, this is an odd one, isn't it? A deck? What? Is this a CCG? No. But they've integrated some card collecting mechanics into it, which make things rather interesting. It's a bit of a different spin on the roguelite progression. So, this deck is full of cards that I will be able to buy throughout my arena run. So if I jump in here...
Welcome to yet another exciting round of Forced Showdown! The only show in the galaxy with lives on the line. As always, the rules are that the contestant must fight his way through numerous titans, earning points along the way. Tonight's show will be The Crucible. At the end of the hall stands the ultimate challenge.
Yeah, just thought I'd let it speak for itself there. So, this is our fantasy game show right here. You start with your basic character and a deck of 30 cards. Now, you get to choose 4 different challenges. Complete enough of them with enough points, and you're able to open the door to move on to the next level and hopefully beat the entire show eventually. You'll notice the little camera drones around here, which I thought was kind of neat. Now, your character has a couple of different abilities. In this case, you've got the sort of basic attack right here, which is a charged beam that ends with a big shot right there. I have an AoE, which has a knockback effect, and I also have this shield, which will absorb all damage for a couple of seconds. Now, I can change the attributes of these by acquiring cards, and I'm going to jump right in here. Now, each of these challenges has a different attribute and modifier to it. So this is Laser Leash. There are more enemies, but there is a beam connecting me and my companion that's going to do damage whenever anybody walks through it. Now, I was mentioning cards. So I have a bunch of cards right here, and you are going to draw these every single arena round. And every time you beat one of the short arena battles, and they are fairly short, you get a mana point. And that eventually means you can build your character more and more and more using this. So it's kind of like leveling up your character, only extremely accelerated. Now, a great way of comparing it, I think, would be to say something like Dota or League of Legends, except in a very compressed time frame. So there we go. All right, I've picked a card. In this case, what I've got is a card that's actually going to give me a damage bonus for the rest of the arena run if I keep the little creature in the back alive, which is actually not too difficult. It's a nice little early challenge, and that's going to give me a boost for the rest of this run until I beat the boss of this particular arena. And there we go. Arena 1 done. And you've got to run through about 8 of them, I believe, before you end up jumping in and fighting the boss. Alright, so we now have 2 mana. So what can I get? I can get the anti-barrel boots, I suppose. That's an upgrade. There we go. So we'll get that. Destroy barrels on impact, and they explode around to do damage to enemies. Or I could heal myself, which obviously I don't really need yet. So you'll see that the cards that you draw will have progressively more powerful bonuses, but you do need to draw the cards you can actually afford. Now, your mana refills at the end of every arena and grows by 1. So you will be able to buy 1 mana's worth of cards, then 2, then 3, and so on and so forth. And the idea is you build your character up and level him up over a very quick time period. And that's one of the things that I really like about this game. The idea that you are getting the rather fun and pleasant experience of leveling up a character Dota style, but you're doing it really damn fast. So it's a different spin on the way that roguelites usually do things. You know, you'll notice in any modern roguelite game, I'm going to activate my shield there to get through. Any modern roguelite game, you start with nothing and you acquire items and bonuses and things like that. And that's, in some ways, quite similar to the way that a game of Dota would go. In this case, they've stuck more to that. And they have given you a set of relatively predictable upgrades in the form of a deck. But they've thrown a little bit of random generation in there. They've thrown a deck building aspect into it. So, you know, you've got that between game progression, even after your character dies and you have to go back to the start. And you feel like you're gaining power very, very quickly. It reminds me of buying an item in Dota and seeing the upgrade of power for my character, being able to feel it in a very tangible way. And that's kind of how this feels, actually. And you've got these really, really short little fights, and you're getting an upgrade on a regular basis. You know, almost consistently, you're getting new stuff. I'm gonna grab Paranoid there. That's gonna give me a shield at the start of every arena, so I can absorb a little bit of damage. Obviously, health persists between these little arena fights, so I want to be a little bit careful not to lose too many, if possible. And you also get the Dota vibe from having those abilities and having different classes that play a little bit differently. Every class has a different set of basic attacks. You know, this beam-style charge that has 4 different phases is pretty neat, especially with the pulse at the end. And, of course, you can get upgrade cards that are going to affect the way that works. You're going to be able to give it, say, penetration, so it goes through enemies. You're going to give it extra range and all that sort of thing. And there's an example of that, Piercing Light. I can grab that right now. I currently have 6 mana. I grab that. My health's pretty good. I can grab a Shock Helmet as well. And you see all of those buffs stacking up right here. Once I've beaten the boss at the end of this run, those buffs will go away, but I'll get something called a boon, which is a permanent upgrade, at least as long as my character stays alive at any rate. And of course, as I said, you go on to the next set of arena fights and you gain gold, which allows you to unlock new cards. So you've got that deck building aspect when you finally do lose. I think that a good roguelite generally has a lot of between-game progression. I think that's one of the defining characteristics of the roguelite subgenre. Assuming you can even call it that. You know, you can apply it to different genres. I think a lot of it really comes down to not so much a genre, but a style of progression. And this game does a really good job of consistently giving you new stuff to play with. So every time you go through it, you've got these randomly generated little arenas. You know, they're not overly complex. You have a reasonable selection of different enemies that you've got to figure out. And then you have a sort of double whammy of variety in the form of not only deck building, but of course also the fact that there are draw mechanics. So the cards that you get every time you go through, they're semi-predictable, but they're not always going to be the same. Alright, I'm going to grab, I think, Increased Blood Flow here for extra HP. I'm going to go Ooh Shiny, which is going to give me a nice, cheap upgrade. On Arena Start, summon an ally from the current world. Alright, sounds good. There we go. And that's going to give me an allied creature, which is going to fight for me. And now we're going to do a little boss fight. Incidentally, every one of these boss fights, as you probably noticed, also affects the arenas before it. Those landmines that were being dropped, they're being dropped by the boss, and every time you fight a different kind of boss, he's going to cause those hazards to spawn in the levels prior to that, which I thought is pretty neat. Also, apparently on the higher difficulty levels, the bosses also get cards so they can upgrade themselves. So, again, that adds a different set of variety as well, because they're going to gain some different abilities and powers every single time. These boss fights are pretty enjoyable, too, you know. A lot of different abilities. You've got to carefully use your abilities to absorb theirs, and also make sure that your build is as optimal as possible, while also dealing with the sort of random nature of it. So there's a good amount of decision-making involved in this, which some roguelites don't necessarily have. You know, you pretty much rely on what the game drops. Here, since you can affect what the game is going to drop, and you have a predictable amount of resources that gradually build over the course of the run, you're able to create builds on a more reliable basis. You know, of course, there are some roguelites that let you create builds, certainly. In fact, almost all roguelites do, but I think this game lets you do it on a more reliable basis, a more consistent basis. I think that certainly has value. All right, what do we want to do here? So this is our boon. I'm going to get plus 20 health here. So that's going to persist until I die, basically. And the more points I get, the more boons I get, and eventually, once this bar is filled up, I'll be able to challenge the boss to move on to the next floor. So what do we got here? We've got a couple of different options. Where do we want to go is the question. Usually you hover over this. Now, oh, there we go. Yeah, so that's a magnetic weapon. Fluctuations, that it increases and decreases the cost. And supplies chaotic illumination. So that would start me with an item. We'll go with fluctuations. I like fluctuations because it can make cards either one cheaper or more expensive. So you can unlock stuff pretty fast. All right, we're going to be fighting Ratbo the Exterminator here. Now, the combat system I find to be pretty damn enjoyable. As said, feels a bit Dota, but it also has that twin-stick aspect to it as well. And you've got to be pretty damn careful. These are... I'm going to re-roll all of these because they're all one more expensive, so I'm hoping to get some cheaper ones here. There we go, much, much better. Oh, mana boost is 1 cost, that's not great, but I get piercing light for 1, and I can stack it as well. So, you know, a lot of these cards actually do stack, so I'll be able to probably grab mana boost next and then... you know, get some extra stuff there. So that's a pretty strong start there. But both of the characters that I've played, and I obviously haven't tried the other two yet because I haven't got that far, they've all felt really unique, you know, and even the basic attacks are well thought out. You know, this is a case of, you might think, oh, well, just holding the button down. Yeah, but the fact that it has 4 different phases and that there's that predictable pulse at the end means there's a good amount of rhythm and timing involved in it. There we go, I'm going to grab the mana boost there. Cool. And I can't spend anything else, which is unfortunate, but there we go. So I actually enjoy the combat system quite a lot. The other guy with the hammer, I think, is pretty enjoyable to play. Although he's quite tricky, because obviously since he doesn't have range, avoiding damage can be difficult. And there are health drops throughout the game. They're just not very common. So you've got to be a little bit careful with how you play. You'll notice that all of those buffs that I had during the first arena have gone, with the exception of the boon. So it does reset all of that. But that means you get to do the whole leveling process again. You know, it's like you're leveling a character almost up to full... you know, from 1 to 10 or whatever, in like 8 minutes. And I think that people actually enjoy the process of leveling up a character from the start. And this game sort of exploits that fact and says, oh, you know what, we're going to let you level a character over and over and over again, like every 5 or so minutes. You know, you rapidly blast through these arenas, drawing cards, upgrading a character, trying to create builds based on what you get. You know, and having to be pretty creative and looking for good synergies, because you can't always afford all the cards, of course. You don't have enough mana for that. As you notice, there's also consumables that you can grab. I'm going to activate the consumable right here, and that's going to send fairies everywhere, which is going to do some damage. And of course, there are cards which synergize with that as well. It's like, hey, buy a consumable card, get plus 15 health or whatever, or every time you activate a consumable, something will happen. And there's so many cards available as well. I've only unlocked... I think 3% of every tier of cards. There's actually loads of them, both character-specific and neutral, that you can equip on pretty much anything. So the deck-building aspect is certainly getting more and more entertaining, and I feel like I want to keep going back because I'm always unlocking those new cards and getting all these different abilities to try out. So I think the game has a lot of replayability. It's a cool little spin on the roguelite idea. Not to mention that the game show theme, in my opinion, is really, really awesome. It's got this weird little sense of humor that I actually quite like. And the little details, like the cameras coming and flashing whenever you do a cool move, is pretty awesome. And the commentators every once in a while mentioning, you know, what the boss is going to do to you and all that kind of thing. It's a really cool little spin on it. Not to mention, by the way, it actually has a lot more content than this. There are daily challenges that you can unlock, and there are leaderboards and mastery ranks that you can get. So, you know, if you decide to get really, really good at it, then there are plenty of things to do. And plus, you can get rare loot from those runs as well. So there are definitely reasons to do it. It's actually a shame that they don't unlock that from the start. I think that might be the so-called season mode that's in the menu. You've got to beat the Crucible to actually get that far. I guess it's supposed to be really, really hard. I've yet to beat the Crucible, I'm going to be honest. I'm not that good at games like this. But that doesn't mean I've not had fun with it. I've actually had quite a lot of fun with it. My companion just got killed there, which is unfortunate. There's also a bunch of unlockable so-called quests, which are basically just achievements, but they reward you with a bunch of currency that can be spent on spinning the prize wheel to get more cards. There are no microtransactions in this game, by the way. You might think, oh, buy cards, then that means there are micropayments. No, it's absolutely not true. There we go. This is a cool little card. I like this one. Every time you use an ability, it sends out a lightning bolt that does 25 damage. So there you go. That's a good demonstration of that. And you can really combo that with low cooldown abilities. You know, if you have a low cooldown character, you might want to grab a bunch of those because you're going to be proccing it a lot. So there's definitely some thoughts to go in there with the deck building aspect of it. Yeah, so I mean, this game is getting better and better every time I play, honestly. I'm really feeling it. The controls are snappy. Good amount of stuff to do. I'll say that, you know, I have been frustrated from time to time, as I tend to get with quite a lot of roguelites. I mean, there are a couple of cards which sort of have downsides, and you really can kind of screw your build up if you pick the wrong cards. I got one called the Masochist Blade, which does a bunch of extra damage, but every time you hit, there's like a certain chance to do damage to yourself that's unblockable. I ended up against a boss that I couldn't figure out exactly how to do damage to him. He seemed to have like a permanent shield on. I ended up just killing myself through the hits, which was really frustrating because obviously I'd spent a bunch of time getting there and I felt a bit cheated at the end of that. But that is sort of the nature of the roguelike design philosophy, and some people are not going to like that. I personally don't. I find that to be very irritating. There is a sort of live and learn aspect to it, but considering, you know, your character dies and you have to start again, I sometimes find that I feel like I've wasted my time there. But with the amount of unlocks and the fact that you're constantly getting new cards, unlocking characters and things like that, it does take a little bit of the sting out of that tail. Alright, we're gonna grab, let's see, we'll go with the thick skin to reduce incoming damage there. And now it looks like I'm gonna get a chance to try and fight the end of level boss. This is actually the guy that I was having trouble with, by the way. And that's not a great little modifier. We have to discard the leftmost card from the hand and draw another one every time, so that's a little bit less reliable. I obviously don't want to draw Healing Factor because that's going to get discarded. So let's mulligan that. Let's mulligan everything but Paranoid. Try and get some cheaper stuff. Obviously, you really don't want to waste your mana if possible. Unfortunately, I'm going to here because I don't have anything that I can buy. But for SHOWDOWN's a nice little spin on it. Like I say, game show theme's really cool, and it's that compressed sort of arena brawler with a little bit of Dota feel to it. A little bit of twin stick in there for good measure. It's a nice little mashup of genres, mechanics, and ideas, actually. Well presented, runs well from what I can tell. And it's got a boatload of replayability, thanks to this card system. What an interesting use of the card system. I think that a lot of games just throw stuff like the card system in there because it's sort of the flavor of the month, as it were. It's like everyone thinks it's going to have some kind of collectible card element to it. But here it really feels like there's a good purpose to that. As opposed to other roguelites where there's a huge loot table and there are drop rates for things. Here it's like, well, you know, you can actually affect the drop rate in some way, but you still get sort of the enjoyable nature of that random element and not knowing what you're going to get. It strikes a nice little balance, I think, between the two. And that deck building aspect genuinely adds to the game. It doesn't feel gimmicky. It feels like it adds palpable progression. I dig that. I'm gonna grab a fusion power right there. Could grab the minor heal, but I'm gonna take the risk of not doing that. So yeah, you might want to give this a try. Like I said, I'm gonna keep playing this because I have had a good amount of fun with it so far, and I'm glad that I decided to give it a second shot. Now, the initial impression left me a little bit cold. I found the combat to be a little bit dull, but then I realized, actually, you know, it's not just about the combat. It's about how you can alter that basic combat system with the cards, and as a result create a different experience every time and give you a good reason to keep playing it so you can unlock more ways to modify that combat system and make it more interesting. Pretty damn cool. Oh, we can get another one. There we go. Let's grab another fusion power and then an overcharge. By the way, this procs this attack twice, so you go bang and then it does it again, which is really great. So if you stack it up with something else that upgrades it, you can create some crazy combos. You know, stack it up with, say, the thing which does the lightning damage every time you use an ability, and things can get a little bit nuts. And it's so satisfying to create that big wombo combo. Like, that's the sort of thing that people really like in games like Binding of Isaac as well, and that feel is here too. It just, in terms of the combat, I think feels like a lot more accomplished than games like that. And it suits me, because I've played a bunch of Dota-style games, and I like the activatable abilities and things like that. Cool. Digging it. There we go. Let's we can grab 2 piercing lights there as well. This is called Forced Showdown, ladies and gentlemen. It is available on Steam for $15 or your regional equivalent. It's getting constantly updated. It's been updated 40 times since launch, so it's definitely still being actively developed, and there are plenty of those cool daily challenges and things like that, so you're certainly not buying yourself a dead game here by any stretch of the imagination. It has had a huge amount of attention, and I think that's a shame, because it's got a lot going for it. It's called Force Showdown. Go check it out on Steam. My name has been Total Biscuit. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then by all means, do feel free to click the like button. If not, the dislike button is right over there. Make sure to check out our other episodes of our new series, After Hour, in which I go in search of really cool indie games and have a little bit of fun with them for a while. I'll see you next time.
sacrifice is made.
Oh, is there a doctor?
It's so invigorating.
This might get messy.
Your end is on the cards.
Hold on! I've got an idea!